Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mixing something that I really love with something I don't know how to do yet. So it's going to be fun. What we're going to do is we're going to make plastic yarn out of grocery bags, and then we're going to knit them into a reusable bag. On it, obviously, ideally, we would live in a world where the only single-use stuff would be like medical equipment. That's not the case. I live in the American South, so I get a lot of single-use grocery bags despite my best efforts. Also, like, I personally don't live somewhere where it's easy to recycle single-use plastic bags. There are some stores that recycle them, but it's kind of a hassle. I try really hard to reuse stuff, you know, single-use trash bags, all that kind of stuff. I still end up with a lot of plastic. So we're gonna recycle it into yarn, into something usable. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit before we get into making all of our stuff is like, how did we get here? Like, it was not always like that. The one-piece polyethylene, not polyurethane, shopping bag is patented by this company called Celoplast. It's designed by this one dude, Sten Gustaf Thulin. It's Swedish. These quickly really became popular because they're a lot cheaper than paper or fabric bags. There's so much marketing in the 70s and 80s to say how good these bags were and how great they were. They lasted longer, they're waterproof, they're, you know, they got handles unlike paper bags. And then in the 80s, the two big supermarket chains in the 80s were Safeway and Kroger, and they started to use plastic bags. They're cheaper because they made this, everyone else started to do it, and people slowly came accustomed to it. Like, people were kind of like, okay, you know, it wasn't the end of the world. And then in the late 90s, we discovered that there's that huge garbage patch in the ocean and a lot of it's plastic bags. And then we start to really see that, like, these single-use plastics are very dangerous. And so we slowly start to get bans and such. Like, you know, countries have bans, like Malaysia has a ban against single-use plastic bags, and then some states in America do. But a lot of places still just give them out. Before it feels like I'm just evangelicalizing about, you know, how bad single-use plastic is and how we all need to fix it, I'd like to make two notes. One, climate change, plastic pollution, and all of the symptoms related to this are a macro issue. Individual people are not responsible for the garbage patch. Individual people are not responsible for these huge overarching climate change issues. We should still try to do our part of water conservation, recycling, and all that. However, if a company tells you that you can, you know, help save the environment by turning the water off while you brush your teeth, you need to look at how much pollution they are contributing. Because I can guarantee you they're doing more than just leaving the water running. You have to do both. You have to hold people accountable, and holding yourself accountable makes it easier for you to hold other people accountable. So note one, it's not a micro issue, it is a macro issue. Note two, I definitely don't want to perpetuate this myth, I guess might be the right word, of like all single-use plastics are terrible. They're not. They're very sanitary, and so like it makes sense in a medical environment, it makes sense for childcare environments. Sometimes single-use plastic is just the safest way to do something. And it's also important to understand why they were built in the first place. We have an assistant. So like, for example, straws are specifically invented for disabled people, because if you have, you know, Parkinson's and you have shaky hands, if you have really weak wrists, holding up a glass can be really hard. And so we use straws. So obviously, like, all single-use plastic is not, you know, the worst thing ever. But we do have to take in consideration why and how. And also, like, when we start looking at all, like, the straw alternatives, like, people use pasta or cornstarch, and, like, people can have really severe allergies to those. So don't be out here bullying people for using single-use plastic because you don't know. Okay, So that is the history of plastic bags and why we're here, with some notes about the bigger picture. I'm not going to talk too much about the history of knitting because we've talked a lot about it, and both the history of weaving and the fashion one that we did. So knitting falls a lot into those lines. So that is all the history section. I am going to pause and we're going to learn how to make our own plastic yarn. Okay, I have my lovely assistant. So plastic yarn is pretty easy to make. I'm going to be using like the t-shirt method. They're scissors. For how to make this, but there are other ways if you want more even strips. So what I do, terrorize the cat with plastic bags. I cut the handles off just so it's easier, but you could cut here and then make the one long uneven strip first, but I just cut the handles off to make it easier. And like we're already recycling like, you know, 80% of the bag, so I don't feel too bad about this. So now we have like our square. So you make a little cut in. I've been trying to keep everything about an inch long. So we have a little notch. And you take your scissors and then you just kind of glide. And then you turn your bag. You want to make sure you're only cutting one part of the bag at a time and you're not cutting multiple pieces of the bag at once. And you just kind of keep spinning. And then notice it's not perfect, like we got some wide parts and some skinny parts. I don't think it'll matter too much, but you do probably want to do a little bit more of an even job than I am. One more note, if any of your stuff has ink on it, be careful. Some ink is slightly toxic, so you don't want to use this on like anything that is going to contain like raw food or anything that like a kid would put in their mouth. And it is also plastic bags, so like obs, don't leave around your pets or your kids unattended. You don't want your kids or your cat to suffocate. So once you get here to this little gusset part, you can just keep following it. And you could either cut off this last little seam if you don't want this little uneven part. I've just been kind of like cutting so it turns, and then that's the end, and having a little piece that you could either like just chop off for smoothness or leave. So now we have one piece and we need to connect it to the rest of our yarn. So I've just been doing kind of the same knot that you do for like power cords. So just kind of taking them, crossing them, loop, knot. There we go. And then now it's connected to the rest of our yarn. I also don't know how much we're gonna need because I'm not really sure how to measure this. Like I don't know how much you get from a grocery bag, but I have a lot, so I'm hoping it'll be enough. Okay, so that is how to make our plastic yarn. Next, I'm gonna show you with just some regular yarn how to knit, and then we'll go from there. Personal opinion, I think knitting is easier than crocheting, but that's my opinion. We'll need 2 sticks. I prefer wooden ones. I just think they're comfier to hold. And then you want bigger needles unless you cut really, really fine strips of your plastic yarn. So you have a tail for your yarn, and then the rest of the bundle is on the floor. So the first step, there's 3 steps to knitting. Step 1 is the cast on. So you're gonna make a slip knot. Slip knot. Slide through. I do that right, yes. And you wanna pull it kinda tight, but not super tight. So congrats, you've now cast on. It's some leeway. So what you want to do, that is how you start one slip knot. So next you're going to cast on. So you're going to take your hands, you're going to make a loop, and then see how this string is behind. Slip, loop, pull. Roll, strings behind, needle, pull. 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 Cool. So that is our first row. When you are starting out, it is really important to make sure that these are not too tight, because otherwise you will not be able to fit the needle in. Step 1 complete. We have cast on. And then make sure that you know the difference between your two tails so you don't accidentally knit this in. So next what we're going to do, I'm left-handed so everything will be backwards, I'm sorry. You're going to take your naked needle, you're going to slide it through. This is technically going to be a purl because I'm in the back, but I'm just trying to show you. Ah! You're going to wrap, okay, and then pull your new piece through. Ah. It's hard to do backwards. Pull, loop. So you'd be doing all of this facing you. Pull, slide through. And then again. Yup. So these are all technically purls, not knits, because I'm doing them backwards. And by backwards, I mean the needle is facing away from me. Wop. It's getting a little loosey-goosey. Another purl. Another purl. One more purl. And one more. Okay, so now we're all the way on our other side. We have some stuff done. I'm gonna quickly knit a few more rows and then I'm gonna show you how to cast off. So let me show you the difference between a knit and a purl real fast. So then notice the needle's towards me now, so this is a knit. I also have terrible form, so you're supposed to not really touch the yarn. You're supposed to have a nice good tension and then pull, slide. Ah, but see, I pulled the whole thing apart. So, go like this, go like this. So now you can start to see the difference between the purl row and the knit row. So see how they're different. All right, let me do one more real fast. And then I'll show you how to cast off. Well, one method of casting off, there's more than one. And don't worry if it takes some time to learn. It's a little bit complicated. Feel free to watch a bunch of different people do it, especially like if you're right-handed, watch someone who's right-handed do it. It'll just make it easier. There we go. So we have our nice little knit. Just a little boy. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna cast off. And that's how we get the yarn off the needle. So first you're gonna knit one onto your naked needle. Boop. Then you're gonna pretend like you're gonna knit one more, but instead of wrapping new yarn, you slide off, you grab your first row, pull it over. Kind of like crochet. Slip, pull, slip, pull, slip, pull, slip, pull. And now you're left with one. And so you just tie him down and you tie all your loose ends down. I kind of like, you got a little knitted swatch. Congrats. The tighter you pull, the more tight your piece will be, the looser it is, the more lacy you get. And that is the basics of knitting. You can also get knitting needles from like Goodwill, or like just ask your friends, yard sales. I wouldn't, like, you don't have to buy them new unless you're looking for something really specific. I think this next thing says we should knit in the round, but the only round knitting needles I have are teeny tiny for making like socks. So I'm going to just knit not in the round and hope for the best. I hope it's fine. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll probably do a little time lapse. Hello. So we have finished our bag. He's kind of ugly because I didn't tie those knots down really neatly, but I think it's okay. It's super stretchy, and I think this will hold up pretty well. I'm really happy with how everything turned out. I like the different bands of plastic. I think it turned out to be a cool pattern. I even did little handles in it. I didn't really stick to the lace pattern because it was really challenging with the thick plastic. And because it is plastic, it has so much stretch in it, I don't think we needed the lace anyways. So I think overall this is a success, and we saved, I don't know, dozens of plastic bags from going into the landfill. And I think this is gonna hold up pretty well. So overall, the pattern was really easy to follow. It was free, which is really nice. I think next time I do this, I would be more careful about making all the plastic strips the same length, or not length, width, because that did cause a little bit of issues because some of it was too thin and it'd snap and I'd have to reattach everything. Knitting with the plastic was actually surprisingly easy. I was thinking that it was gonna be challenging, but it was honestly about the same as like knitting with acrylic yarn. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm still working on putting all the social media stuff up. It's a drag and I don't want to. I don't know what we're doing next week yet, shockingly. But yeah, overall, mission success. I think this is something I will use a lot, and I think I'm gonna try to keep recycling all of our bags into yarn. I think that's all I got for y'all. So do all the YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, whatever. And I will see y'all next week.